NetSparker, the developers of a comprehensive automated web security platform that includes web vulnerability scanning, assessment, and management. NetSparker's desktop and cloud-based security solutions employ a unique and dead-accurate vulnerability scanning engine that automatically verifies vulnerabilities and provides a proof of concept. For more information, visit them on the web at securityweekly.com/NetSparker. PlexTrack is the platform that helps cybersecurity practitioners get the daily work done. Red teams can create reports in half the time and track risk to resolution with the blue team. Teams can centralize remediation efforts across all scans, assessments, and audits. Effectively communicate risk in real time through simple visualizations, scanner and ticketing integrations, and robust analytics. PlexTrack is perfect for collaboration across all teams. Visit securityweekly.com/PlexTrack to claim your free month. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. The crew is here. We're getting ready to do the security news. But first, I have an announcement. That's right. Everyone loves my announcements. Do you want to stay in the loop for all things Security Weekly? Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe on your favorite podcast catcher or via our YouTube channel. Sign up for our mailing list and join our Discord server. All at securityweek.com/subscribe. We have a whole network of shows that you can subscribe to and get updates when new episodes are released. We've been doing some upgrades here to the studio, which is interesting because our audio listeners and video viewers don't really get to see much of the changes. There might be a slight improvement to the video quality, but more importantly, we have 17 screens here in the studio. There's 7 screens on each set and 3 on the news desk. And it's been a lot of work. Props to the entire team, especially the production team, mostly for putting up with me throughout the entire project. But in doing that, I had some security-related things I just wanted to go over briefly before we dig into some of the news. But so the Samsung TVs, so these are Samsung TVs. Now, first of all, I didn't connect them to Wi-Fi because they're really just monitors, and I didn't even want them on the network for a whole host of reasons. But in looking at some teleprompter stuff, I found one of these codes to like a hidden menu. I won't call it secret. It's really hidden, right? Okay. Like on Samsung TVs, if you hit mute 182 power, seems to be a fairly well-known way to access a air quote secret menu on the TVs. But I also found this really cool website, and I want to spend some more time. wiki.samygo.tv is a whole wiki dedicated to, apparently there's a whole host of hidden menus on Samsung TVs, all different ways to hack them. The Tizen operating system is Linux-based. They go through all the different models because that code doesn't work on all models, but they've got a lot of it documented there. Has anyone done any hacking with Samsung TVs? Any of our hosts gotten into that? Hey, if anyone hasn't, or if anyone listening knows of people that have done that kind of stuff, I'd love to have someone on the show. Yeah. I haven't. I mean, I literally was just.
Anytime I buy something, I always immediately find out what the service menu is, and I go see what's in it. Like a dishwasher. Like we bought a dishwasher, and I immediately looked up, how do you get into it's some combination of buttons. You go to the service menu because you want to see what's in there. Are there diagnostics? And there's often diagnostic systems that'll give you messages. You can see what's wrong.
Right. And I also like to you try and use that menu to turn stuff off.
Like you can disable stuff.
I don't need sound on any of the TVs in here. And you can't turn that off via the regular menu. So I'm like, well, what else can I do? Like, there's other stuff I might want to turn off permanently. Right?
And you can modify features, and who knows, you might find something that's disabled on purpose that you can enable. That makes it the premium models by going.
Exactly.
I'm starting to imagine, at like a 2 or 3 day hacking camp. Just to spend time with your TVs,
right?
Let's just fuck them up for for a couple of days.
Well, what's interesting is probably another 15 more downstairs that we could. There's 6 for the news studio, independent of the 17. So we got lots of monitors. If you want to come to the studio,
so, if we do this, and we break them, we could just call in a warranty, like just be careful not to break any, avoid anything. Sorry.
Right. Or we just use one as a sacrificial.
Right. So we might have to open up some shit. But.
Yeah, I got one or two we could use as a sacrificial lamb. If we bricked it, we bricked it. Right. It does say you can't brick your TV because it looks like they're trying to hack the firmware.
You buy like a really cheap one that's got the same basic system. You can fool around with that one and see if it bricks it or anything, and then you know what.
From what I've heard, Paul, you've got 1 or 2 or 20.
20, yeah. Like, I have a lot of TVs. Also, one of the other devices that we're using is from JTech Digital, and I was looking into this product for a number of reasons. Security being one of them. Also, functionality and how I might be able to program it and automate it. But what I realized was this was a replacement for one. So, like the original one that we had, it's an 8x8, basically router, right? It's a very rudimentary HDMI router. So you get 8 in, 8 out, and you can map any of the 8 ins to any of the 8 outs, right? Very basic. And this was the replacement. And I'm like, I never really messed around with the replacement. The original one was really horrible. I had a web interface and a telnet server.
Ooh.
And the telnet server, you actually couldn't set a password. But this new one, I found by guessing, because I couldn't find it in Google and I couldn't find it in the documentation with the default password. Like the documentation was like, oh, just go to the default IP address and start configuring it. I'm like, yeah, that's great. Except when I go to the default IP address, it's asking me for a username and password. And I actually guessed capital A admin for the username and password. And then the IP configuration asked me for a default gateway. However, I can't find any evidence or downloads of firmware updates. Like I can't figure out a way that the company documents to do a firmware update. And there's no way in the web interface, or it has a serial connection. It has a USB-C port on it. No mention in the documentation or on the internet of what the USB-C port is for. It does respond on Telnet on port 23. However, the default credentials don't work on that service. My theory that I expressed to Tyler earlier was that you give it a default gateway so that it can talk to China and they have the password to the Telnet service. Makes sense, right? So I don't know if anyone's worked with any of the... They make some switches too, which is interesting. Kind of weird. Weird IoT, like AV IoT stuff has been kind of a...
It's like OT, IoT, like IIoT stuff's the same way, and it's like you see all this really strange stuff, and almost all the boxes have like they'll have like a serial connector that's not on the documentation, and you're going to wonder what that does, and then you realize it's probably for some kind of controller, or a diagnostic machine, or something that is all proprietary. But you get a lot of weird stuff in that space in terms of
weird stuff.
Yeah, because we were looking at like these. Fire gadgets, and I was like, wow, look at all these plugins on this thing, and I'm like, it's really just for water to come out, but it's, you can connect to it, Bluetooth.
Cool stuff.
So
go ahead, Lee.
You remember we were looking at that video camera that was all remotely controlled. All somebody had to be there physically was to point. I'm thinking, how secure is all this shit right now? How many ways can it be hacked if all they're working on his function?
That seems to be what, especially in the AV realm, Lee, is what I'm finding, that it's all about functionality.
Yeah.
Like they just have not, I don't know, had the, like in industrial control systems, I think there's been a lot of scrutiny over the years from security researchers. But I don't see that same level of scrutiny on the AV. It's just about function. Gear, I mean, it's all, to lead your point, all about functionality.
I bought the cheapest camera I could find to put in my friend's house, because the house is just sitting there. And I was looking at it very skeptically after I bought it, because it is all about functionality. Now, you could change the password on it, which was nice, but it's basically everything on it is streaming up to the cloud.
Yep.
And the cloud that they're using is in China. And so all these images are sitting on a server in China. They swear that they're encrypted, that they can't access them, and all this stuff. But you don't. They don't. How do they prove that? It's just kind of.
You're telling me the Chinese government can't access?
Oh, of course not. They would never do that. It's like that would be against the rules. But yeah, but for my purpose, it's fine. I don't care if somebody.
Don't
hacks
they need a court order to get?
Oh yeah.
Wait, never mind.
Yeah, no, it's just like a warrant.
That was funny. Any particular news stories you guys want to start off with?
Well,
Can we talk about the executive order for supply chain? I mean, that's like my thing today.
Yeah. So is Trump and Biden now 1-for-1 on executive orders that are focused on cybersecurity, or has Biden already surpassed Trump in that? Because Trump was really just
he wrote that CISA one.
CISA. Trump was CISA, and that was his one.
I mean, this one's not even specifically about cyber.
It's just in there, though.
Cyber is in there, because I actually read the whole thing today, and I was really interested in what some people here's opinions of some of this stuff was about the future threat of of supply chain attacks, and how this order may or may not do anything to prevent that. I mean, the executive order itself is not trying to define a solution. It's trying to initiate
an investigation.
It's saying all these different agencies need to look at their supply chains and start figuring out what the problem is. So the order itself doesn't say here's what you need to do. It says do something. Yeah, and is charging all the different agencies with looking at various infrastructure supply chains. But I would
support that. Politics aside. And again, I wasn't trying to, compare to Trump and Biden. I'm just from a cybersecurity perspective. I want to see more focus on that from the White House, and I think this is a positive thing given the SolarWinds attack, that we should, especially from a federal government perspective, put more scrutiny on the supply chain within cybersecurity, especially.
Well, yeah, I mean, one of my things is just that I don't think we have a good enough understanding of critical infrastructure and how it's impacted by not just the infrastructure itself now, but by the world at large. So, like we were just talking about, like IoT, and all these kind of things. All that stuff is so pervasive now. You start wondering, what would my company do if my internet was down? I mean, one of the things we used to do in disaster planning was like, what would you do if your IT people are all gone? Like, I don't know why they're gone. A tornado sucked them off to Oz, and now they're not here anymore. But so what would your status be at that point? So now you're at moment X, everybody's gone. What do you do? Go. And so I wonder about
I would be in the exercise in the meeting room in the corner, clicking my heels, going, "There's no place like home."
Yeah, I know you would, and that's why I would bring that up.
I would add that element of realism to that tabletop exercise,
and
Doug.
I'd buy you a pair of ruby slippers so you can wear them.
I would totally wear them.
But I mean, I've been thinking about that a lot. Like, even just at home, you start thinking, what would you do if your the internet's out? So and now your phone is out, and are we soon going to have a situation where we can't really function either as a company or at home or anywhere else because none of these devices can connect, and they're getting where they don't want to operate if they can't. Like, that camera won't work if you don't connect to the internet.
I mean, all we have to do to simulate that in the studio is to go live, and then that's when things will go wrong, and that's our exercise.
So if the power goes out here permanently, or the internet goes out here permanently, we're kind of out of business. And I mean, so what's our business model with that? I mean, and I heard Joff say, aren't we already there? And he's right. I think we are kind of already there, but we're getting even further there. It's like an asymptotic line and every day. And so I was glad to see the executive order, but I was kind of interested in where people thought, is that supply chain thing just that dramatic? I mean, is that something that's coming, like a huge threat? I mean, or is it already here, or what? I mean,
I would say yes, because you look at SolarWinds is a really, really good example, right? Because you're putting essentially a network infrastructure monitoring and control kind of company in so many networks with such implicit trust, vendor to vendor to vendor, right, across the network, and it's a huge lesson learned what's happened there, because everybody is like, oh no, it's fine, they're a trusted vendor, blah blah blah. But a lot of these control solutions and monitoring solutions, they have such high level access to stuff, and it's a huge lesson. It really is, because and especially the way it was done. Right, this was not just your commonly garden compromise. This was
Microsoft says that SolarWinds attack took more than 1,000 engineers to create. And they didn't just make that number up off the cuff. They had, they assigned 500 engineers to investigate the attack. And Brad Smith is quoted as saying they estimate the number of attackers that were involved in the coordination of the SolarWinds attack to be at 1,000. Microsoft being what it is today in their history, there's that carries a lot of weight with me. I think they're on point.
No, me too. And think about it from the attacker perspective. How much reconnaissance and research went into leading up to that point in time where they're like, well, look, we've got a piece of software here that we know is embedded in 60, 70, 80% of infrastructure across most of the Western world. I mean, that took some work to even just discover that. And then you go into the, planning and execution of actually compromising that at a very deep level with many, many engineers and a lot of complexity. So, we are talking about something that's not, it was not, certainly not a fly-by-night operation, right? We all know that.
And I think there's.
Hang on, Tyler.
No, I was going to say that begs the question. Like, I really don't think we've seen, like, if it took 1,000 engineers, you're a nation state, you have this access and you now utilize it. The end game and the level of access and what you're going to do once you get that access is certainly not the extent of what we've seen. That seems like small potatoes for something that has been abused here. So the whole thing around this is, what are we missing? What is now in play? What other companies that we don't have visibility into? What companies that have secondary ramifications? Those are the pieces that, like, the lessons are still going to be learned, and I really don't think we have a grasp on what this actually means.
But another thing, Tyler,
another way to say that, Tyler, is the discovery and the disclosure of this particular event actually an accident in a longer term sequence, where they didn't want it to. It comes back to Stuxnet, right? We always say that they didn't necessarily want it to get out that soon, but it did. Oh fuck! Now we just got to take advantage of it as quick as we can. And how many more of those are out there?
I was going to say how many more?
Because it's easier to build those capabilities than it is to build nuclear weapons, fighter jets. You look at what it costs for physical weapons versus even if you looked at what it cost to retain 1,000 security professionals. Those don't all have to be within country.
It's not even significant.
Right? I mean, to get, you've basically got 1,000 developer / security people to build a team to accomplish a goal. That, in my opinion and research, is a lot less cost than trying to build a nuclear weapons arsenal, than trying to build a fighter jet program. And what is your average fighter jet cost? It's hundreds of millions of dollars. I can take a fraction of that and get 1,000 people that are working towards a mission in cybersecurity. That's one reason why, in my opinion, that this whole kind of cyber warfare aspect has exploded, because now a country like North Korea, like Russia, like China certainly has that capability. They have the means to do that.
And there's a sort of movement, I think, as well toward a lot of like very similar stuff. So there's this sort of homogeneity coming in networking, because we see that narrowing. I mean, sometimes there's a shake-up where everything changes, but there was a whole pile of operating systems. Now there's a few.
Yeah.
There was a whole pile of hardware. Now there's a few. I mean, like we were talking earlier about some of those standardization and PCI Express and things. And you see all that stuff sort of moving down this narrowing tunnel, which means that all these devices are using the same pieces at some point. And so it becomes easier, I think, to start these supply chain type attacks, because if if 2/3 of all the machines in the world are running Microsoft, that's a lot easier than when
focus your efforts.
When 10% are running Microsoft, and there's just all kinds of other things.
And the beauty of it, and the scary part at the same time, is you can focus your efforts. You can use this against your adversaries. You can use this, like North Korea did, to go rob a bank.
Right.
And get money to build physical weapons. Plus, I can use that same talent, and I can go attack someone else as well. It's actually really frightening.
If you're going to be a rogue nation, you might as well be really, really rogue. I mean,
But the thing with the cyber realm is there's no repercussions. Like, Russia is, fully documented as hacking into Ukraine. Like, no one should be shocked by this, right?
No one is.
But, like, where's the backlash? Where's the anyone going, this isn't cool. Like, hey, Russia, you shouldn't do that. Like, no one's going. Everyone's like, oh yeah, like we do it too. So we don't want to call out Russia as doing that because like we're doing it too, and everyone's doing it.
And
so
it sits below the press level too because it is esoteric. You know, when somebody drops a bomb on a village, there's this big graphic of that. But when somebody hacks a Bitcoin wallet, it's kind of like, okay, now I got to explain this and I got to explain that. Nobody's going to understand it. By the time we get around to what happened, it's like so everybody's changed the
but
channel.
only to a point, Doug. Because there is ultimately kinetic effects to something like what we're doing. I mean, and think about what just happened in Texas. People are learning lessons from that. They're like, well, look, they've got vulnerability here, here, and here. So now we have strategic points that we can go
If we
after.
can affect the water and the power and do that in a coordinated manner, well, that's a really evil thought, Joff.
That's what
right.
When we first started talking to FEMA and EMAs and all these things way back in the early 2005 time frame, that was one of the things I was saying to them was we need to understand this infrastructure and what it is, and so much of it is so weird and esoteric and nobody knows how it works. And we don't understand. They all say they do. You go ask them and go, do you understand your critical infrastructure in your state? And, oh, yes, absolutely. You're like, show me the map. And they go, oh, yeah, this was drawn by a guy named Phil back in 1984, and I think it's pretty accurate. And you're going, I'm not sure that's actually a map of the infrastructure, but
that's already outdated. I did that graphic last week, and it's already outdated.
I know, and I don't think they had that, and that's why I hope that something that comes out of the executive order is people starting to look at things like in Texas and go, how do these things interact? How are they connected to each other? What are all the pieces and the working parts? And where are they like, look at that guy in Nashville who blew up the telephone. He blew up that AT&T center, and nobody down there had cell service and telephone service for like weeks because that one little place was so critical, and it was just some storefront.
I used to get really bent out of shape when I was back in the world of operations, which thank God I'm not anymore. But about performing appropriate analysis of interdependencies, and this is exactly the issue.
Yeah.
Right. People have just piled on and piled on and piled on, and nobody is looking at what are the interdependencies and what's going to happen when the crystalline lattice framework collapses and you break all these interdependencies. And I think Texas just learned that the hard way.
Right.
And it's important for everybody to take their lessons from that. But this is the same is true with any IT infrastructure. People forget. I mean, just a stupid, simple example. It's like, we make a joke out of blaming the DNS, right? Well, the DNS is a massive dependency on just about everything we do, right? So don't joke about it. Solidify it, right?
And just look at what Russia does to Ukraine and realize that the U.S. is next. And I mean, that's really your digital crystal ball right there, which just kind of has me scared.
I wondered if it was a test exercise anyway. It was like a beta test of
because it was like a DDoS attack. Like basically, Ukrainian authorities didn't attribute it to a specific threat actor, but also what I gleaned from that was, or maybe that was a different story. They attacked some specific software. It might have been a different story, but I think Ukrainian authorities are like, we don't want to attribute it to any specific threat actor or group, because then Russia's going to know. The intel that we have is basically back to my conversation with Peter. Like, then Russia's going to know, wait a minute, if you're saying that's GRU group whatever number, that means, like, do you have malware on their systems? Like, now we're going to go look for that malware on those systems. Yep. So Ukraine's like, I don't know who did it, when we all know it was Russia. Like, it's all like a political chess game. Did we ever think when we got into cybersecurity 20 years ago that it would be this level of political chess game, right?
I'm a bit of a Luddite with some things. I would actually have to say that there are certain elements of infrastructure that do not need software controls, period. They just don't.
It's one of the things that saved Ukraine in that example was their power grid is so out of date. They actually had physical controls. They could go drive to the substations and turn the power back on. Yep. We don't have that everywhere in the U.S., which is kind of scary. Hold on, I want to go to Tyler now because Tyler's he's riled up. I can tell he's calculating what he can and can't say.
Tyler's fired.
And can he say it in Russian?
I'm just curious,
Go, Tyler, go.
Like, really, do we do we think that executive orders or this level of policy is driving an industry or making a difference? Looking at like the supply chain attacks, right? Even if we're at a high level, which I believe SolarWinds is a very high level in comparison to something like, the next 10 models of M1 chips have an encoded bit that gets dumped into the silicon at the factory because they're made in China, so that all the Macs can then phone home at some point. Like, when we're starting to talk about supply chain and really how deep and how dependent we are on all the way down to the silicon levels, the question becomes, how do we actually secure against this? We have to trust vendors. We have to trust certain hardware. We have certain manufacturers that are able to scale and keep up with the technology we're building. But there's, not enough technical people to evaluate that. And at the scale that these companies would have to evaluate, there's no profit margins for them. So how do we actually take the stance of a better secured world and start to defend against supply chain? Because I don't see a great path forward right now, and policy definitely is at such a high level that, yes, getting more people and getting funding to look at it is a great step because it provides education. But really stopping these attacks, I think we're way behind the ball right now, and we really do have we need to think creatively and use our hacker hats and come up with much more interesting means to do this at a greater scale more quickly.
Well, that's why I was glad to see the executive order, though, because it wasn't specific. It wasn't saying do this or this is banned or this is forbidden. It was more like, let's create some DARPA projects. Let's figure out how do we solve this, and it may be something completely different is needed to solve it. I mean, that's where the internet came from in the first place, was we need to solve a problem. We can't solve it with the stuff we have now. So maybe this will drive some initiative, because I agree with you, Tyler. I don't think that we can just say, fix it and it'll be fixed. And I mean, that's incredible. It would never work. But if we can see that starting to drive some investment and drive some, by that I mean government investment in things like DARPA projects, where you take a bunch of smart people, give them a whole bunch of money and say, here, come up with something new. And maybe then something new and different will come out of that. And that's why I like those kind of projects, because I worked in that lab. I know Lee works in a lab like that too. And it's nice when you see really smart people given money and they sort of say, we don't know exactly what you're doing, just do something cool. And you often sometimes you get a death ray that destroys the universe, and sometimes you get the internet and everything in between. So it's kind of cool.
And the Chinese would be the thermal exhaust port? In that example?
No, they're the swamp rats in that example. Depends on if you built a ray that destroys the universe. Yeah.
So in this particular example, I would love to be able to solve the problem, right? My understanding, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, and I probably am wrong.
You're wrong.
Okay, Jeff preempted a little bit, but is that the SolarWinds compromise ultimately was about some code that was introduced using a legitimate code signing certificate into their code base, right? That's my understanding. So there was trust in that code signing certificate. There was obviously compromise of that code base somewhere along the line from suppliers. How do you actually mentally get your head around that issue as the company, as SolarWinds, right? How do I, because they've got probably suppliers and contractors, right? How do I know that contractor is doing the right thing? How can I vet them, right? That's the essence of the issue, right? That gets right down to it.
It's not even how you vet the contractors, how do you vet the code?
Yeah, that's interesting. So my story number 22 is France ties Russia's sandworm to a multi-year hacking spree. They say the campaign dates back to late 2017, continued to 2020. They appear to have compromised servers running Centrion, sold by the firm of the same name in Paris. Now, they say that they haven't been able to identify how those servers were hacked, and they found malware available via a back door. It kind of sounds like to me that was a supply chain attack.
Yes, it does.
Right? That was where I was reading between the lines, and I'm going, wait a minute. That sounds eerily familiar.
Wait a minute. I've heard
this story before.
Well, like Josh said earlier, how many more of these things are there? And I mean, there may be whole bunches of them, and they don't want to reveal this until they can maximize its usefulness, because the minute you reveal it, it's no longer useful. So how many more are there? maybe a lot.
Isn't that Occam's razor, something like that? The most obvious,
the simplest solution is the
solution
best.
is probably the right one or something like that.
Yeah, that's Occam's razor.
Like the InfoSec corollary to Occam's razor is keep it simple, stupid, right? It literally is.
But I thought it was the default password.
I think the default password is keep it simple, stupid. Anyway.
It's just KISS.
It's KISS 2021.
2021.
That's the password you were supposed to use, Paul.
There was a Senate hearing on SolarWinds that ties into our conversation. The article states there's a number of big questions that remain. And I want to know if these are questions that remain or if they're questions that we would like to answer, not in any official capacity, but speculate like we like to do on our podcast. But it says SolarWinds still hasn't determined how hackers originally got into its systems. Is that true? Have we yet to pinpoint the initial attack vector, infection vector, and mechanism?
I'll caveat this with I think there's a difference between there's questions that we still don't have an answer for versus there's questions that we're not going to share with the public.
Yeah.
Or the answers that we're not going to share with the public.
I find it hard to believe that we at this point in time don't know how it happened.
Well, think about log retention. Think about a good enterprise SIM. Even places that are doing great things and have a substantial budget, these particularities, like if this actor has been in there, like which they have for an extended period of time, because it takes a lot of time to play out this engagement, get enough intel to know how to do this, and then develop the plan and get that plan approved, because there is budgets. These are just like companies. They have to make sure that the cost of burning tooling is worth the effort of what the end game is. And so that extended period of time, I would surmise that they probably do not have the log retention or the capability or visibility to track this down, especially with the level of stealth it would take to begin this type of engagement.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it could be, Tyler, I mean, somewhat to your point, that they got in and covered their tracks enough that we may not find out they gained so much access, we may not find out.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with what Tyler says. If they were truly sophisticated, they were sophisticated enough to clean up their tracks, and they were probably in there for quite a while. I mean, again, this is to me good old-fashioned espionage, where you invest a lot of time and effort. This wasn't a casual, we just happened to see a vulnerability, so let's exploit this company. This was, I mean, what makes this fit the category or definition of sophisticated, to my way of thinking, is it was deliberate. It was targeted.
Yeah.
It was advanced, and it was persistent.
If what they ended up exploiting at the end of the day was complicated, somebody mute Paul. Doug, lean over and hit mute.
I'm reaching for his power mute down
power
here.
mute.
But the sophistication is the fact that it's good old fashioned espionage. They're really working at this, and they invested time and effort in it.
I mean, I bet
I don't think that they necessarily know how they did it yet.
I got to put myself in the hacker shoes for a minute, or hackers, or the adversary shoes. I bet you an opportunity arose, and the opportunity probably was access to source code. And once that opportunity arose, they're like, okay, let's plan what we can do with this. Mm-hmm. Not let's act quickly. Let's plan the and it's probably how a lot of these things start, right? It's like, we've got access to a supply chain source code. What does it feed? And what can we do with it from here?
They're just using espionage tactics on it, just like Peter was talking about with people. They're just using it on companies. So they're saying, let's develop intelligence. Let's figure out where the weaknesses are. Let's approach it. Let's offer it some options, and then we'll exploit it.
It's interesting. The article says no one.
Here's a scenario.
The next question is, they state no one has fully settled debates on whether the incident amounted to espionage or something worse.
What's worse than espionage?
So I'm
insider.
Well, in this, I mean, if it amounted to something worse, I think we would have seen that. We would have seen critical infrastructure getting taken down. My initial, where my brain goes to something worse, right?
So think about our first guest tonight. I become friends with a SolarWinds developer, and they're really struggling with some stuff. and I point them at some code I thought that they can import into their stuff over on Stack Overflow, code that I provided.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, and then later on they have another problem. I give them part 2 of my code.
Or here's just a GitHub repository I found. It's awfully useful. You might give it a try. And they go, wow, look at this. It solves all our problems.
That's truly evilly. I mean, if you were to look at a target and then put code out there that you think they might adopt, like, wow, that is, one, some evil thinking, and two, like, a lot of forethought.
No, that's I could see that's exactly how this would play, though, because you think about a programming shop. You know, if they're under contract constraints, business timelines, the developers are under pressure, the developers are desperate to get stuff done. Maybe there's one or two that are not quite as good as the other team, you know, and you can see how the setup can potentially work. And then you have somebody come in and go, you know what, I know a lot about that code. I can probably help you out a little bit, you know.
But I mean, even if they don't say it, they just know it's coming. I mean, think about how many times you've been working on a piece of code and you reach what I call the long dark night of programming, which is where you get to this point you just can't fix it, you know. And I used to call it a 1-pack or a 2-pack problem when I was a cigarette smoker. And you know, how many packs of cigarettes am I going to sit here smoking while I try to figure this out? And if you could go on GitHub or you go on some research and go, how do I fix this problem? And it's a common problem. And wow, look there. There's a nice little setup right there that says how to fix problem X. And you go, yes.
Import this library.
Yep.
And write this code. And it's not exactly what you need, but I import the library and I modify my code
and
accordingly.
You're tired and frustrated and you've been working
and it works. And I'm like, holy shit.
You go,
like,
done. I can go to the bar.
And you're like,
push, baby. Right?
Yep.
Right.
Push
you're
it.
like, ship it.
Yeah, and they're calling, going, is this ready? Is it ready? Is it ready? And you're going, it's ready. Thank God it's pushed. Go. And then, you know, it just slips on through. And then there it is. And you let it lay there for years.
And it comes back down to the human fallibility, right? Because people under pressure, you know, will make poor decisions. And you know, you push people up into a corner, and that's what. So part of, I think what we're actually sort of circling around.
A pull request. Anyway. Carry on.
What we're actually circling around is part of the review of this on the supply chain side should be what kind of pressures were exerted, what kind of business timelines were exerted. You know, how did we fail from a human perspective, not just from a technological perspective?
It's interesting. I had 2 stories that tie into exactly what we're talking about. I did. It's actually 3 things. Well, so the article also says suspicions about there could be more victims that remain unrevealed.
I imagine that.
Right. Okay. So that's
the backdoor code that's laid down somewhere, like you said, critical infrastructure. Like we have a gun pointed at other places, you know, other countries' heads, and they now may have a gun pointed at us. Like we don't typically utilize access unless there's a very huge demand to do so. But having that access in your back pocket, like what implants were laid down, what companies were affected, even if they did reveal it, what other code that is not within sight of the signature base or implant, like I would have laid down all kinds of code in some interesting places with that kind of access. Like this would have just been the initial access. This is the burnable code. This is stuff that you get in and it's free to burn. This is like your short haul C2 initial access. You've got long haul stuff that you would lay down and maintain that other access for a significant amount of time. So I still don't think we're at the
I'm going to back up your point because there was a ZDNet article that I believe was covering the recent report by CrowdStrike. Their like state of the something. Oh, chart. My story number 9 chart shows the connections between cybercrime groups, and I believe this was based on the recent CrowdStrike report that was released. Now, what I love about this article is it's not talking about anything new, but reminding us that there are different categories of cybercrime, right? There's access brokers, there's phishing kits, there's hardware for sale, there's crime as a service, there's loaders, there's DDoS for hire. There's all of these different activities. All those activities kind of tie into, and they broke it down into phases of like the actual attacks versus the monetization, money mule, money laundering, reshipping, dump shops, blah, blah, blah. They break that down into a chart, right? Services, distribution, monetization. This crosses multiple groups. Then they actually talk about, there's actually a graphic from CrowdStrike that talks about operation, distribution, developing, likely operates in, and it ties together all of the different groups and or malware chains. It's a stark reminder, and something that I hope we get better at moving forward, that we can't just make attribution about, oh, it was Russia. Like, that is such a 50,000 foot view of what's happening in the digital realm with respects to hacking today, that is just astonishing to me that we haven't said, well, okay, I mean, Russia may have been the primary motivator or not. Maybe they played a role, but what role did they play? Were they in the initial access?
Companies to hire
Right?
the criminal groups. Like they wouldn't have their fingerprints on this.
Right.
They would hire.
No, I want to buy the 0 day from one person. I want to go get the payload from another person. I want to get the CNC from another person.
It's
I
like
want to use the
using
ransomware code. I wanted someone else to
It's
get.
like using mercenaries, you know. It's like,
Yeah,
why use your military when you can
right.
hire a bunch of yahoos to go in and
But
shoot the place up?
All these different phases, they can, just like in an enterprise today, you can build that functionality in-house. You can go buy that from a commercial vendor, or you can go contract that out to someone else. And likely, as it exists in enterprises today, it's a mixed bag. Some stuff you develop in-house, some stuff you go buy off the shelf, and some stuff you contract out. And so to pinpoint attribution, that makes it so much more difficult.
How all defense contracting works.
That doesn't even-
So
Right,
it's the same exact thing. It's like,
Right.
you know, Raytheon doesn't build every piece of it. They say, we'll build the pieces we don't have and can't buy cheaper. We'll subcontract with this.
Yeah.
And, there just happens to be a group in North Korea that manufactures this little part we want. So we're going to kind of fluff over this business here, and they'll sell it to this guy in Singapore, and he'll sell it.
There's a shell company on top of a shell company
'cause
that
it's like,
gets imports it from North Korea and then inspects
And I
it.
mean,
That
that's
doesn't even-
how everything works.
That doesn't even attribute the fact that a lot of this is political. You have oligarchies within inside of Russia that tie back into political parties that then tie back into particular families that then tie to criminal organizations which were stood up by the oligarchies. So your 5 or 6 layers cut out and deep, and then you add the commercial and criminal enterprise on top of that. It's attribution again. I think attribution is pretty hard, and I am very skeptical of anyone that provides even that 50,000 foot view, because I know how I would go about not doing that.
So it seems like it'd be an interesting conversation if we had a couple of guests that do attribution to see what they could talk about versus your point, Tyler. I mean, I think it is really hard, but they seem to
There's
do
a
it.
few working groups
How do you
that would be-
reconcile?
Yeah, there's a few working groups I think would talk about a few things, but these working groups, they're definitely not going to talk about anything in the organization or current things, and revealing the level of information and access to certain data sets or network traffic, like that becomes a very hush hush community. It's pretty small, but there's places that do pretty good attribution, but even they're careful and they'll never bring it to public. So whatever we're reading is pretty high skepticism.
Understood. Yeah, it's just to be fun. Maybe this is a conversation to have a bar when we can do that.
if there's ever another bar.
There will be.
There
The
will
bar
be.
will be raised.
There will be. One day I'll get to stop saying
That's just
in
the
time of
clinical
plague.
depression talking.
All right.
Hey,
Did we
lighter
cover,
note,
hold on,
there's
did we
a-
cover
there's
all
a
the nation?
There's a cipher on Mars. Come on now.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think we covered all the nation state stuff. Jeff, Cipher on Mars. Was this the one in the parachute? I saw
Yeah.
that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
It is.
Spoiler.
I didn't spoil it.
I didn't spoil. I was
agreed.
just saying, where it was.
Oh, well, yeah, you did say it was in the parachute. So.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, there's a little pocket in one of the things, and there was a rolled up piece of paper. You can see it on the video.
What I love the most, and this is so dweeby of me, but the fact that Perseverance actually tweeted when it was landing, I thought was just super cool.
And they used Linux. They
There's
used
way
Linux.
other cooler things than.
I'll tell
and-
you what, I get a lot of flack for running Linux, but like
it's like that's what's running everything like that.
Put the thing on the Mars.
The problem was 15 minutes after it tweeted, it turned racist and started tweeting all kinds of bad stuff. So
that was the AI. That was the biased
AI took over. Next thing you knew, it was just like,
Son of a bitch.
wow, those Earthers, nuke them all. I'm free.
I like the one where the image of Mars
Well,
had Bernie
there's the
Sanders
message.
and the mittens.
Be sure to drink your Ovaltine. Okay.
Is that what it said? No, what was that?
Yeah,
Jeff, tell us
that's
about
the
the
actual
site.
message, Paul.
Was it? Was it, or was that a joke? I don't know. I didn't read that.
That was a joke. Yeah.
Mine was a joke. There was a message in the parachute.
There's a message. Well,
it said, "Don't
if I
trust
tell you
Jeff
what the
Mann."
message is, you kind of don't need to read the article or investigate it. But they talk. The article says smart people decoded it. Nitpick as a crippy. They actually deciphered it. But they if you see a picture of the umbrella, there's a pattern to it, and the pattern translates to ones and zeros and converts to digits. And what's
since it was
interesting to
running
me
Linux, it said you have 286 packages to update. Damn it!
Well,
Damn software
apparently the
updates.
laptop on the thing is like a 15-year-old system or something like that. I heard somewhere.
It's a gateway.
So it's possible. But what I thought was interesting is they didn't take the binary and like convert it to ASCII text or something, because if you're trying to communicate with an alien intelligence, what makes you think that they're going to know ASCII? So it was simply 1 through 26 is A through Z. That's probably tricky enough. And so
What was the message?
I'm not going to say.
Oh, okay.
You have to read the article.
Okay. Fair enough.
Please update your Windows
It's more of
XP
the
as
NASA
out of-
motto. It's a message that they've put on a lot of things. I'll say that.
Yeah.
It's like
And
a
it's
map
not
to
Cypher
NASA
from
headquarters
the
for aliens.
Gotcha.
The message is probably the overlords are coming.
Yeah.
Stand back.
Surrender,
I
Dorothy.
feel like I have to change my background to like
you
a
got it out of
Perseverance
me.
background there.
Yeah, there you go. That's better.
Anyway, it was a lighter note for all this nation state attack talk, and we're all doomed kind of stuff.
Hey, you know what? It's kind of exciting times, right? They put the thing on Mars. It's sending
it's
back
awesome.
And it's got a drone on it. It's a drone with its own drone. It has a helicopter drone attached to it that can break
Drone
off and
within a
fly
drone.
around.
Oh,
Yeah.
like Falcon in the MCU.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's got its own
Oh
little
no,
drone.
it's incredibly cool.
Yeah, it is.
They're doing.
Hey, don't we have some other news?
Nvidia has throttled the
Thank you.
RTX 3060.
I saw that
Is it just
story.
the 3060 or is it all the 30 series?
They said it was a 3060. It didn't say the rest of the series. It's just like that one souped up card that, I'm like
But if I'm going to mine Bitcoin, I'm going to get a 3070 or 3080 or 3090.
well, I think that's the chipset that's on the same one, though. The throttling's in the chipset.
Okay,
so
so it
I would
crosses
guess
all
that
30
applies to that
series.
whole. It's the whole
Yeah.
30 series because I would. It's the same chipset.
So the throttling, the throttling is targeting the Ethereum algorithm.
Yeah.
is my understanding.
Right.
But why?
I know.
I was reading
Well,
through it, and
I
I'm trying to
think
work
they-
out the intent.
Because
And
I think, put yourself
I
in the shoes.
think-
But Joff, put yourself in the shoes of Nvidia. Like you're making these really awesome cards, and like I really want one. And the only way to be able to get one is to buy a pre-built system that has one for my son, and it works awesome, by the way, and I love it. But you've made these cards for gaming enthusiasts,
Yeah.
or people like us that want to crack passwords, or like just have a really nice video card at a really good price. The value, the thing with the new 30 series cards that I'm finding is for the money, you get a faster card than what's on the market
Yeah.
today, and that's why there's so much demand. The demand is being eaten up largely by people who are trying to mine cryptocurrency.
Right.
And I
Well,
think
so-
if you're like
so
Nvidia,
are
like
they-
we put
are
all
they
this
trying-
R&D time so people can like mine crypto cards. Like we want people playing cool games and like going on Twitch and evangelizing their experience with I'm playing the latest game on this awesome Nvidia card. I don't know, maybe I'm too optimistic.
I hate crippling, and I don't think it helps. And
No, I agree, because I also think, Doug, to your point that we're going to put a limitation in our product, and the first thing people think is I'm going to hack my way around that limitation in your product. You know why? Because you put that limitation in your product.
Don't tell me what to do with my damn card that I
No, I
paid
agree.
for.
I
I
agree.
mean, and only limit it to Ethereum, so it's kind of pointless. And I'm like, what did this accomplish exactly? I mean, I get your point that like, we want people to do the cool stuff with this, but I'm
Right.
like, why not just make
No,
more cards and make more money? I mean,
Well,
Someone
I think,
short
but it
sold
goes
all
back
their
to Tyler.
Ethereum and they need a Bitcoin.
But Tyler, I think it goes back to your point.
Just
I think
follow
we
the
talked
money.
about 2
Tyler's
weeks
right.
ago on the supply chain issues. Right? There's the is
Well,
it
yeah,
tung-
they
is
can't
it
get-
tungsten that they mine for
it's
silicon
something-
chips?
there are economic
And
limitations.
The COVID put restrictions on China,
Yeah.
and COVID also put restrictions on when it lands here in the U.S. and the dock. So like, they've been hit with kind of this triple threat of supply chain issues with AMD and Nvidia chipsets, and that's what's limiting the supply
So
chain.
I'm just going to mine Bitcoin and buy Ethereum with that.
That might be the reasoning here, because there is a supply issue with chipsets, right?
Yeah.
So
that was the only
maybe-
logic I could get to.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't know, man. I think someone has Bitcoin or they short sold Ethereum. Like, why just Ethereum?
Yeah, it's weirdly targeted. It is weirdly targeted, and that bothers me.
it's that roaring kitten guy. He's got it all wrapped up.
It's
Well,
almost
what if there's a bunch of
sophisticated,
investment
isn't
money
it, Jeff?
tied up in crypto with inside of Nvidia, and they legitimately have backers and or people on the board or VC money that is, being funded through crypto and specific crypto, and this is causing issues. So that would be an easy way to staunch this issue in a very short market.
It's going to be an amazing time, though, when you can go without the shortages, when you can go buy a new Xbox, PlayStation, AMD processor, or NVIDIA RTX 30 series.
Yeah.
I mean, those things are in such high demand. I can't wait for the day when we don't have these shortages.
Yeah, wouldn't that be awesome?
It's going to be amazing. They
I want
just
two of
can't
them.
make enough for the demand.
I want two.
I don't know. Are people going to overcompensate?
I always overcompensate.
I do too. I agree.
Wait a minute. We're humans, right? Is the
It's in our
Western
nature.
government over ordering vaccines? There's your answer.
I went Threadripper, which we're doing a technical segment on coming up. It's a 24 core with 256 gigs of RAM. It's total overcompensating.
For a lot of stuff, that would be fine.
Yeah, I have a serious question. If we can move on to another story.
Please do.
I want to say it's Lee's story number 4. Hackers steal credit card data abusing Google's apps script. So it's a variation of MageCart, is from what it looks like. My question is, in this scenario where they're going after Google's app script and it's not the e-commerce sites themselves, is this considered a supply chain attack?
It is to me.
Yes, but I don't think they actually are doing it within inside of Google's code. I think it's Google's code applied to individual vendors.
It's bolt-on code that's just sort of sitting there on the sides of
That's-
it. I would
bolt-on
still
code
call it
that's
supply
vulnerable
chain, but
to
it's not
then-
pure supply chain. So it's not actually, it's not in
So
like Google.
It's a variation of a supply chain.
Yeah, because it's not
Attack.
like a whole software package or a library. It's like a snippet of code or in JavaScript or something, right?
Yep.
Which is still
Is
supply
it
chain.
more of a what's Alan Friedman's thing?
Yeah.
SBOM. Is it an SBOM issue?
Yeah, it would be
Well,
part of
software bill of-
your
bill of-
SBOM. Yeah, because like I said, it's not necessarily a full library. It's a JavaScript kind of include usually in a web app, and I would put it in Alan's SBOM. I agree, Jeff. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for your clarification. I was just curious.
Also, we'd be remiss not to talk about Apple's M1 chip and the malware discovered against that platform. I find it fascinating that there are still some software packages that have not fully supported the M1 platform, yet malware has caught up to supporting the M1 platform.
Really? I was just saying, like, that seems really quick. I mean, really quick.
Really
out the
cool.
door.
So the one that's really neat is the Silver Sparrow one, because Silver Sparrow Mac malware was out like in August, and I think it was November. I didn't have to look at the article on it. Red Canary did the research, and they had a second version that was M1. Like before anybody really had a clear mission for what to do with the Silver Sparrow malware, they had an M1 native version. Forget the emulator, and pretty much the anti-malware detectors, they don't see it because they really don't know how to read an M1.
Yeah, because you know why, Lee? I think my theory is to get a small piece of code, such as malware, to cross-compile on an ARM platform is so not out of the realm of possibility. Like, that's fairly easily, because ARM is a pretty standard platform, and if it's a small code base, the amount of changes you need to make to cross-compile that, or even compile it natively, and get that in there is pretty easy. But when you go into Adobe Creative Suite or a really large software package, there's a lot more crap you got to change to make it compatible with a new chipset, and that's why you rely on emulation for those larger software packages, and they lag behind.
Well, I'm not knocking the emulation or that exactly what you said. You're going to have to use it if you're going to move a sizable piece of code. I'm just saying, that the sizable piece of code that haven't moved are including the things to detect malfeasance. They're not yet there to really pick it up natively.
Right? It's scary, right? I agree. Maybe that's why they moved. It's a great point, Lee. That's probably why they moved to go, hey, let's create some, M1 based malware that's based on ARM, because it's going to take the, software vendors longer to create the detections for it. Very astute. I like it.
But the other interesting thing on this is that when you're doing the Mac malware, this was signed by an Apple developer certificate, but once Apple caught them, they revoked both their certifications, so their code doesn't work anymore. It won't install, rather. You have, and so it's and you're banned.
What are they installed on?
Well, it was installed on 30,000 systems, or 20,000, 29,160-ish, to be exact.
Wow.
So it's actually funny you say that, because in some of my red teaming exercises, we go to the lengths of actually obtaining some code signing occasionally, but it's short lived.
Yep.
Because
you get revoked.
The minute the defense vendors get a hold of that, they're like, boom, that certificate is gone.
And it takes a little bit of effort to do that. I mean, standing up fake LLCs, sending in the paperwork,
it's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, right.
It takes a little bit of effort.
So it kind of pisses me off when that happens. It's like, crap, burned another code signings. Anyway, but it's so there is a downside that.
And you can do you can do all that digitally to get a code signing certificate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of manual steps.
But it's not like I read where Facebook was requiring before you take out an ad for political purposes, that they were requiring that they mail you something to verify your address was in the U.S. to prevent what happened in the 2016 election. I'm not sure if some of the software certs have gone through the same level to verify the provider.
Last time I did it, there was kind of like two levels. There was the easy level that you could get it relatively quickly.
Yep.
But then there was the sort of enhanced level, which took a lot more manual steps.
Yeah.
It took things like a Dun and Bradstreet number and that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
right?
I gotcha. Some more checking. It may be something that you had to receive in the mail, perhaps.
Yeah. And either way is not necessarily a cheap prospect, although for a nation state it doesn't matter. But it's still quite a lot of manual steps. You wouldn't want to burn too many of them.
Right.
You'd probably
or you just steal someone else's, as we've seen in the past.
Honestly,
you steal somebody's. Yeah.
Yeah, the most viable way, and the way that I see it used the most, is having a viable product, having a product that actually works, that provides usefulness, that is popular, and then just having extra permissions or extra code base behind that application.
You mean like TikTok?
Wow.
Not to name any names.
Boom.
If the shoe fits.
Just saying.
So I guess me and Tyler have to write some really sexy mobile app or something, and then
there you go.
I got one, Joff. I just need you to add some new colors and modules for the Australian farms.
Yeah,
we got some kangaroo farms. I need some creative ideas on.
Oh, Joff doesn't know, because in Facebook he doesn't get news anymore. Oh wait, no, they rescinded that, didn't they?
Yeah. They finally struck a deal, I think. That's actually kind of an interesting story, the Australian government. That's actually going to go around the world, too. This is just the first of many.
Agreed. Joff, I also wanted to talk about, there were two Python vulnerabilities. One is in JSON Pickle, and I want to say I implemented JSON Pickle. It's like serialization and deserialization of JSON data, right?
Objects.
Is the Pickle there's the Pickle library.
Python objects.
Yeah.
Always serious.
Yeah, I mean, I always say, just watch where you're putting your pickle, because that can always get you in trouble.
Never trust user input in your pickle. It's really, I mean, that's
right. It's the wrong direction. There's only output.
I mean, actually, our developer Marston, I'm like, you need to take a look at that, because I wrote that code, and to be honest, I don't remember if user data ends up in that deserialization of that object, so we need to make sure.
What fascinates me, though, is there's multiple languages now as a pen tester that I have encountered, and Java's one of them, Python's another. But any time you are serializing and deserializing, quote unquote, objects across a network, there are inherent dangers, right? If you're not very, very disciplined about exactly the kind of object, including, you know, all of the attributes and methods, and you're being very, very specific, probably by using some sort of hashing signature kind of approach.
Right.
On
Is
those
it
things
is
that
it akin to
deserialize.
is it akin to parsing? Because I remember Snort back in the day, like you had to parse the data coming off the network.
It is, but it's worse. It's worse because you're deserializing an object that turns into a piece of code that gets instantiated by the destination application.
Yep.
And so then you end up with ultimately just flat out code running, which extends usually to things like command injection, to, you know,
it's code within the data essentially.
Yeah. Exactly right.
Yeah.
And you know, the Apache Commons stuff was a classic example of this, right? This was on the Java based.
Yeah, Java deserialization is like a whole thing.
And, you know, and a lot of pen testers like threw their hands up because they're not programmers, right?
Yeah.
I rolled my sleeves up.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
and started programming, and there was a whole bunch of interesting things you could do there, and unfortunately, developers tended to just flat out trust the object they're deserializing, and that's where the fallacy is, right? If you just trust that object you're deserializing, well, it's kind of like walking into the street and just dropping your pants, right? I mean,
yep.
You know, it's not a good idea.
So what's the alternative? I mean, how do you trust in that sense?
That's a great question, Jeff. Jeff, I defer to you on that. Yeah, because I mean, deserialization issues have plagued multiple languages over time with vulnerabilities.
Yeah, I think it's a great functionality to have, but just like anything with functionality and security, there's always this, you know, this balance and trade-off. If I were doing it as a developer, I would probably develop some sort of a hashing-based signature kind of system where the object that I'm deserializing, I actually took an entire hash of, and I checked it against some sort of mechanism that said, okay, that object is legitimate or it's not.
With all due respect to most developers out there, I don't think a lot of them are going to do that.
Yeah, no, a lot take the shortcut, Jeff, because it's easy to implement that.
Well, not just from ease, but you know, deadline pressures.
What that means, what that implies, Jeff, is that the frameworks that people are using, the modules in Python, the frameworks that you're using, need to start encompassing that kind of functionality in them, so that it's an automatic, so that it's a trivial switch, not something the developer actually has to add on themselves, because, like you said, they're probably not going to be thinking in that mindset and not going to want to do it. But it is a problem. PKI might be a potential solution to be applied here as well, potentially, right? Again, it comes down to the same thing. You're going to create some sort of signature on the object, is what you're going to need to do. That's my gut anyway.
Jeff, also, my story number 16, there was in the Python programming language itself, there was an unsafe usage of sprintf as a remote code execution.
There's still an sprintf out there? Wow.
CLib comes back to haunt us so many times, right? That's interesting.
Yeah, so Python is actually urging people to upgrade to 3.8.8 or 3.9.2 to address an RCE that's being tracked to CVE 2021-3177, which goes back to sprintf.
So literally a format string issue.
Yeah.
Ultimately, in the underlying code. Well, that's a bummer.
And that's not trivial either, because I dumped all this on my developer. Poor Marcin. I'm like, Marcin, so when I was writing code, I kind of implemented JSON pickle, which means we need to upgrade that library, which might mean you need to upgrade some code in there. I'm like, also, by the way, I need you to get to 3.8.8 or 3.9.2, which is a whole other regression testing and possibly, modifying code to get there. I mean, this essentially, I feel this pain from developers. Jeff, you were asking about what did developers do. Basically, this means, okay, all new feature requests, you've got to put
those developers like to shank their boss, just saying.
Yes, I learned all those Polish swear words.
Exactly. It's totally swearing at me in Polish, like a lot. Halt all those features that I'm still going to hold you accountable for, and fix all of these security issues, but still deliver everything on time is what developers are dealing with, right?
So we downloaded a GitHub library and solved the whole thing.
Right.
It's Chinese, but hey, what the hell?
Paul, did that conversation start off with, "Hey, we're canceling your lunch break.
Yeah,
we've got something for you to do."
Work smarter, not harder.
That's it.
I had a boss that used to say, "What did you think you were going to be doing tomorrow, or an hour from now?"
Right.
I'm going to need you to come in on Saturday.
Joff.
I was just going to say that you as the pointy-haired boss, you can always come back in and go, but dude, you got Docker. I've got you fucking DevOps. What's the problem here?
Right. Yeah. The problem is, okay, you upgrade your library, upgrade your Python interpreter, and now you've got 16 things to fix.
So only 16? You're doing pretty good.
I'm optimistic.
Yeah, like 116,000 maybe.
And I've been there. Been there. I mean, I took us from 2.7 to 3, and that was way more than 16 changes, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say, man, you did the heavy lifting.
That's the heavy
That's
stuff.
a bad
Hopefully,
one,
But I mean, but to your point, Joff, it is much better when we have those ephemeral environments that you can make those upgrades, go through the automated testing, see what breaks, and fix it and move forward.
So, to be clear, it's not just Yum Update here.
No. You gotta. I mean, Joff, you could go into the nitty-gritty details, right? I don't remember all the nitty-gritty details, but
I just didn't want anybody listening to us thinking, I just go have them run Yum Update tomorrow, it'll be all better.
No, like regression testing, right? You got to test when you make a major update to your interpreter or to a library. You've got to test all of the functionality and then fix any resulting bugs. And it's always an unknown when you go through that process. It could be you could get lucky and go, hey. Like everything works. Like cool. Like maybe I get some new warning messages. But
there was one guy that got lucky at that. No, his name is Dave, and he lives in Yuma, Arizona, and that was it. They used it up, and now it's gone, and everybody forever
and
after.
If you're still lucky, you've got a few minor code changes to make.
Yeah,
and then usually you're really unlucky, and you've got to change a bunch of.
Like there's like a 75-line program, and I got 74 errors in it. It's
and
like,
if you're really unlucky, there's like a dependency library that's not compatible with the Python interpreter upgrade that you're like, I have to rewrite an entire library or switch to a new library to get to that.
Now none of my drivers work.
Yeah, one of the unfortunate things about many programming languages, and Python is definitely in this bucket, is whenever they go to new version releases, even if they're minor version releases, not major, there's this tendency to go, you know what, I didn't like that old module name. I'm just going to fucking change it. And that is horrendous, right? I mean, it makes Docker beautiful because Docker you can fix that versioning in time, but the changeover can be really painful, and there's been some major examples of that in Python.
Well, is that the difference between import and import as? Can you can control the namespace a little bit from what you import,
you can control the namespace as you import things, and you can use that kind of as a band-aid, but it's annoying.
It's not great.
Annoying.
Yeah, it's not great.
But, I wouldn't know, right? Because I've stopped teaching Python for the SANS Institute. By the way, if I hadn't told anybody that, I've stopped teaching Python for the SANS Institute.
That's the world's loss.
But I think he's got somebody else who'll help him teach some Python.
I said you got to read that sentence carefully. Stop teaching Python for the SANS Institute. That doesn't mean that I've stopped being me. I'm still me,
But also, my story number 13, there's also a heavily used Node.js package that has a code injection vulnerability. It was supposed to, so it's interesting, the quote from the developer. So if you implemented this library, it was a way to get system information like CPU utilization from the local system that you're running as. It was made for more Electron applications, the way I read it, more so than web-based applications. And the developer has this in the documentation, states this. He says, this library is still a work in progress. It was supposed to be used as a back-end server-side library. Will definitely not work within a browser. However, that doesn't mean someone goes, oh, that'd be a great thing to implement in a browser, right? But we can't blindly trust all of our components. Look, there's some great software out there. We've been sponsored by, and I've talked to people that make some great software for analyzing code for vulnerabilities. However, this is an example of an instance where you really need a human to go, wait, I just read it what the developer wrote. And like he literally wrote that this is a work in progress. But back to what I mean,
that's never happened before,
right? We've said this even on this segment. You don't want to blindly trust it. However, if you're looking at this and there's a deadline approaching, and you're like, wait, if I implement this library, I can literally save 5 days on my timeline. So I'm going to do that, even though the developer said it's work in progress. A work in progress that works to solve my problem and saves me 5 days.
Sold.
Exactly.
The long, dark night of programming.
I am all in. It is golden.
I thought I was going to be smoking a whole carton of unfiltered cigarettes.
It's all good, right?
Push it. We're done.
When's that project to put the production library in, Paul? The 12th of Never?
Yep.
And then it slips through, and then 2 years later, people are going, "Why did this happen?"
But then, to your point, Doug, it comes down to technical debt. Now I've got this library, and I'm like, "Whoa!" 2 years later, that work in progress never got any work and never had any progress.
Yeah,
and all those vulnerabilities are still there, plus more. And now I'm stuck with rewriting the entire module again when the surrounding code has increased exponentially by 8 times, which means now I'm spending even more time rewriting
Then
this
all
component.
those swear words you learned in Polish really come in handy.
Yep.
Not to mention
So
such as the Polish phrase,
how do we fix
technical
this?
debt really sucks.
But Jeff has a great question. How do we fix this? How do we
fix this?
It's a good question, Jeff. How do we get to the point where we're not stuck? It runs the get. Like, do I write everything myself versus how much do I rely on external libraries, right? And where's the happy medium?
The happy medium is I'm going to write all my software in machine code.
Yeah,
from the
myself.
No, I'm going to write it in microcode and then machine code from the ground up.
Right.
I would suggest that a happy medium, while that sounds like a novel idea, I'm not sure that medium is where we end up ultimately, or where we need to end up. I mean, we're talking about time and convenience, but it's ultimately an economic factor. So how do we incentivize or de-incentivize, the good, the bad behaviors?
You want to know about the ultimate software?
Well, this is about, again, does come back to, I mean, the problem is economics, because it always will be. Management and marketing always going to want it faster, better, quicker, get it to market. But this is that shifting left stuff they talk about in systems development live. You got to get the security people in there early to say, are you sure you want to use this? And then maybe you do a little more validation on it. And if they don't sign off on it early, you can stop this stuff when it needs to be stopped, instead of, it's in beta and now it's already there.
I don't know. I feel like I had.
You're getting closer. You're getting closer. But how do you get those security people even in the companies in the first place? It's okay to say it.
I feel like I had a better
regulation.
answer to this until I looked at and dug into it, the interview from the Qualys researcher that looked at pseudo, where Todd Miller, who's one of the most accomplished open source developers out there, had done an a phenomenal job with the code for pseudo. And all it took was a team, not to diminish their efforts, but it took a team a couple of months of reviewing the code to find a series of vulnerabilities that led to some issues. And it that was a really big moment in my life when looking at software security to go, I think we're all doomed, because if someone like Todd Miller put that much effort into code that literally is the gatekeeper for privilege escalation in all modern Linux and Unix, and not even modern, but really old systems. And it took a team of researchers 2 months just combing through the code to find 2 vulnerabilities to circumvent all the protections that had been put in place. That really... I don't know what the answer is, Jeff. I don't know.
What else is out there?
Yeah.
The ultimate supply chain attack, though.
Yep.
I mean, it is.
And we
it is, because I need to use sudo to update all of my other packages.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, but the ultimate supply chain attack is compromise software compilers.
Or compromise the APT or apt-get binary.
There you go. God.
There you go.
No,
Oh,
no.
God.
All right,
Did I
we're all
just-
doomed.
Did I
Yeah.
just plant that
Okay.
seed in every attacker's mind to go?
Yeah, you did. It's
Hold
all
on. I run sudo to gain privileges, but I'm doing that to be able to run
Nobody's
the
sharing
apt or apt-get binary to update all of my packages. And
Compromise GCC.
is it up to that particular binary to do the checking of the integrity of all the packages that are downloading? Is that chain goes
It could
right
at least
to
check the hashes.
it does that
Yeah, it does
binary
do
has
that,
the
right.
logic to check
Yeah.
all of those hashes.
Right.
If you were able to circumvent that,
Then all bets are off.
all
and
bets are off.
we're
I
all
can load
doomed,
whatever
and
software I want. In
I,
any
for
Linux
one,
system.
welcome our new overlords.
So,
This sounds like a real chipper note to possibly end on.
Yeah.
Good point.
yeah.
I'll
'Cause I
be
starting to go to
passing
dark
out the
places
rope.
again.
So
Wow.
Did anybody keep the red pill? Because we just need to go ahead and take it.
I'm taking both at once. It's over.
So
Thank you. Go ahead, Lee.
No. I'm thinking we're either going to go off the deep end or we need to end it. Because
We
I'm
already
not
went
thinking
off the
about
deep
what about sudo's big brother SU? Is it vulnerable?
God help us all.
Job, take
Let's-
us out.
Take us out, John.
Take us out.
Take us out.
Thanks everyone
take
for
us out.
listening and watching. Chop, take us out.
It's been another lovely Thursday evening with Security Weekly, and it's good to see everybody because I love you guys. Okay, over and